Here we have the Museum of Natural History in Vienna. It's a beautiful piece of architecture. It sits on a number of planes. We have this light and street sign and garbage can and hedge quite close. We have these trees and these people a bit further back. And of course, in the distance, we have the museum itself. And the question is, how do we draw it in a way that will help us keep the proportions as accurate as possible? And in my experience, one of the really important ways to give ourselves the best chance of accurate proportions is the order in which we draw. So how would I draw this? Where would I start? And how would I progress this drawing to make it as easy as possible to keep my proportions correct? So the most important question is, where do I start? And while I certainly don't always start in the center, that is often the best way to keep proportions constant. If I were to start, say, on the right-hand side, and my proportions are out a little bit with every new thing I draw, by the time I get from here to the other side of my scene, a small error with each architectural element becomes larger and larger and larger until it can become quite a troublesome width by the time I get over here. But if I start in the center and work out in all directions, then that creeping error can't creep as far before I get to the end of my drawing. And it also means that the most accurate part of my drawing is the central part, which is where attention usually goes. The other important factor with where to start is, where can I draw something really accurately? Where is a relatively simple part of the building to start with that will be easier to get correct? Because that then will help me align the rest of the drawing. And in this, I think it's quite clearly this section here, because it's bounded by nice straight elements. There's nothing overlapping it to complicate it. And if I get this correct, then I can move downwards, I can move upwards, I can move across in each side. So this will be my first section. Now after that, I think I'm going to move across and do the corresponding section on the right-hand side, because it will strengthen my perspective lines, let me draw some more detail, and I can't really draw the dome until I've got everything the dome sits on and these two towers, because I'll be aligning each of these structures with what comes underneath. And so I don't want to risk drawing this before I know how it aligns with the columns and windows that are underneath. So I'll be drawing this second. Now after that, I can then draw what comes on top, because I'll have plenty of information under here to get these proportions correct. I'll have the vertical alignments, most obviously, but I've also got this height, which will help me accurately judge the heights of the drum, of the dome, of the towers, because I can see everything then in terms of, is it higher or lower than this section I've already drawn. So this becomes a measuring device for what I now go on to draw. On the horizontal plane, I can measure directly against what I've drawn below. On the vertical plane, I can use this as a measuring device to measure distances. So then we start to come into this spot where there's more complex elements. Another good reason not to rush to draw this rather messy section of objects overlapping each other is that by the time I get down to this now, I know my observation and my drawing will be warmed up, but also my sense of the scale of the building and how large things are. And I'll find it easy to eyeball where these things overlap. So my next section to draw, but I'm going to stop just short of these clipped shrubs because I want to get them in. And at that point, I'm going to establish this section here. And particularly once I've got this line in place, I can then establish this light, because the base of this will align with this footpath edging, and it will also align at the base of the column with this hedge, and then the top of the light will be a line in with about halfway through the columns. So I can position this nice and accurately if I don't draw it till now. If I were to draw this earlier, I could well draw it too large or too small. If I were to start with this, then I'd be trying to fit in the architecture with the scale of the lamp. It can be easier to start with more complicated structures. Now, I thought about whether even to include this because, let's face it, it's not the most attractive element to put in my drawing. However, it does have a nice foreground feel. It engages the viewer with something a bit closer in a section of the drawing which otherwise is moving further away. So I decided to keep it, although I will straighten it. This will be my 7th architectural element. I think I will finish this section off as number 8, and then as my 9th section I'll finish the left hand side. All that's left to do now is to draw it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. As often happens, when I finish a drawing, turn off the camera, look at my drawing, I realise, I forgot something. And I did. I don't know whether any of you noticed, but I didn't draw the little figure on top. So I put it in just so you can sleep tonight. It's always worth a little investment in time to consider the best order in which to draw the elements of a drawing, because we can make it much easier on ourselves to progress the drawing through and keep all the proportions in place with a little bit of thought beforehand. I don't know whether you noticed, I actually swapped the order I did 2 of the things towards the end, but it didn't really matter at that point. And certainly it's good to remember at the start, when it feels like it's going to take forever to do this drawing, that it gets faster and faster, that the more we draw, it's not just that we build up our confidence in that session with the subject, but it's also that we get more and more points to reference off, which means we can be more confident of where to place our lines more quickly. This drawing took about an hour and a half to do in real time. Maybe for another video, I'll put tone on some of these drawings that I'm doing just as line work. I hope you found that helpful. I hope it motivates you to want to draw. So get drawing, have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.